more than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
SETI's results for 2018 proves our effectiveness as a development partner, placing people at the center of our work and leveraging partnerships and cooperation to transform policy imperatives into action. With an eye on the rapidly changing global context, SETI is innovating to constructively address the emerging challenges and opportunities for the region. As part of our competitiveness program, SETI is designing precise tools to assess assets and capabilities in the productive sector to determine paths towards higher value goods and services. As our flagship program for partnerships, the Americas Competitiveness Exchange on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, the OAS, will continue to leverage good practices and the power of networks to increase trade and investment in the region.
For us, the role of the OAS is very important, connecting countries, connecting governments and private sector, and letting us know what other countries are doing it and how we can replicate that in our countries to enhance development.
For me, who has come here to look at how can we develop our own ecosystem, our own innovation hubs, our own accelerators, I think seeing this, touching, feeling it, seeing the transformation, seeing how quickly you've made it happen is a testament to what is possible. So I believe all of us leave here stronger than ever.
The Working Group of Experts on Subnational Competitiveness, the GTEX, is our gateway program to promote local economic competitiveness policies alongside municipal and state-level governments, together with the private sector and academia.
Este tipo de reuniones te sirven para darte cuenta de todo lo que se está viviendo en América Latina sobre los temas de competitividad. Y hoy justamente en este sector estamos viendo sobre todo los temas de innovación tecnológica, pues que si hablamos de competitividad tenemos que hablar de tecnología. Y me está ayudando mucho para ver el panorama de ver lo que están haciendo otras ciudades y lo que podemos llegar a aplicar también nosotros en México.
The hub on the transfer and commercialization of technology is connecting and strengthening national innovation ecosystems in the region. Each edition of the hub trains budding technology entrepreneurs from the region's public and private sectors to take promising products and services from idea to market.
Porque es importante que estemos juntos en esto, porque la región tiene que estar unida y me parece que hay mucho conocimiento en la región que todavía no está explotado comercialmente como podría ser, y esta es la mejor manera de hacerlo.
Tenemos la proyección de cada año generar y compartir nuevas experiencias entre aquellos que contribuyen a la innovación. Queremos cambiar el cómo lo hemos estado haciendo en Latinoamérica. Queremos generar la unión de los países, queremos colaborar.
Our virtual platform on technology foresight, Prospecta Americas, will support OAS member states in identifying and mapping future trends and technological development of critical importance for the Americas.
Este esfuerzo, el cual viene siendo apoyado por la Organización de los Estados Americanos, nos permitirá tener una gran información para poder mapear estas iniciativas de innovación y poder que ellas contribuyan al crecimiento económico, a la competitividad y al bienestar de nuestras naciones.
Como bien sabemos, nos encontramos ya en la cuarta revolución industrial, la que está cambiando rápidamente la forma en que se hace negocios, se produce, se consume y se genera bienestar y entretenimiento en el mundo. Es la mayor amenaza, tal vez la mejor oportunidad que tenemos en nuestras naciones.
The Inter-American Teacher Education Network, the I-10, is working to improve the quality of teachers with an emphasis on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. In 2019, the I-10 launched the first STEM Teacher Fellowship of the Americas. The Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas, ECPA, is working with governments in the Caribbean to advance electric mobility and clean transport as the sub-region pursues energy independence. Under our Integrated Water Resources Management Program, SETI is responding to the demand of member states for platforms and applications that enable data-driven policies. In the Central American region, for example, we are expanding the scope of Costa Rica's Plataforma Interactiva de Aplicación del Clima Tropical. This tool captures and disseminates real-time climate and water data, promoting resilient agriculture. The Inter-American Committee on Ports is building human and institutional capacity through public-private partnerships to address port modernization, logistics, and security. CooperaNet, SETI's multi-stakeholder platform for cooperation and partnerships, is being relaunched in 2019, responding to member states' call for a more robust hub for cooperation. In a region where 8 out of 10 consumers begin or end their shopping process online, SETI has entered into a partnership with the private sector.
Es una herramienta que sin duda acerca a las MIPYMES hacia la demanda que hoy está migrando a Internet, y con eso pretendemos mejorar las ventas y el posicionamiento de las empresas pequeñas.
As we look to the future, the Executive Secretariat for Integral Development will continue to leverage cooperation and partnerships to expand our reach, proving that together we are much more than the sum of our 34 member states.
Me and my kids have been there for over an year right now. And children are friends. It doesn't matter where they come from.
nosotros estamos en una zona netamente selvática. La línea de adyacencia va desde el norte hasta el sur, va desde Modesto Méndez hasta Aguas Turbias, tanto en el norte como en el sur. Esta línea tiene 215 kilómetros de extensión.
De allí vino él, se buscó creo con los de la OEA y de allí vino el proyecto para acá, para Judá. Y fue que lo dieron el terreno y lo dieron todo que era mano de obra y el material para hacer las casas que están ahorita. Y por ese motivo estamos aquí viviendo todavía.
La misión continúa trabajando en la implementación de medidas de fomento de la confianza mientras aguarda el resultado del reclamo que está atendiendo la Corte Internacional de Justicia por la disputa marítima, territorial e insular. Nuestra oficina en la zona de adyacencia realiza verificaciones a solicitud de ambos gobiernos, facilita reuniones y patrullajes conjuntos entre las Fuerzas Armadas y promueve una cultura de paz y cooperación entre las comunidades locales.
Children will be children. And they have harmony. They don't see each other as a different country, but they see each other that they're growing together.
Hoy, esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
SETI's results for 2018 proves our effectiveness as a development partner, placing people at the center of our work and leveraging partnerships and cooperation to transform policy imperatives into action. With an eye on the rapidly changing global context, SETI is innovating to constructively address the emerging challenges and opportunities for the region. As part of our competitiveness program, SETI is designing precise tools to assess assets and capabilities in the productive sector to determine paths towards higher value goods and services. As our flagship program for partnerships, the Americas Competitiveness Exchange on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, the OAS, will continue to leverage good practices and the power of networks to increase trade and investment in the region.
For us, the role of the OAS is very important, connecting countries, connecting governments and private sector, and letting us know what other countries are doing it and how we can replicate that in our countries to enhance development.
For me, who has come here to look at how can we develop our own ecosystem, our own innovation hubs, our own accelerators, I think seeing this, touching, feeling, seeing the transformation, seeing how quickly you've made it happen, is a testament to what is possible. So I believe all of us leave here stronger than ever.
The Working Group of Experts on Subnational Competitiveness, the GTEX, is our gateway program to promote local economic competitiveness policies alongside municipal and state-level governments, together with the private sector and academia.
Este tipo de reuniones te sirven para darte cuenta de todo lo que se está viviendo en América Latina sobre los temas de competitividad. Y hoy justamente en este sector estamos viendo sobre todo los temas de innovación tecnológica, pues que si hablamos de competitividad tenemos que hablar de tecnología. Y me está ayudando mucho para ver el panorama de ver lo que están haciendo otras ciudades y lo que podemos llegar a aplicar también nosotros en México.
The Hub on the Transfer and Commercialization of Technology is connecting and strengthening national innovation ecosystems in the region. Each edition of the Hub trains budding technology entrepreneurs from the region's public and private sectors to take promising products and services from idea to market.
¿Por qué es importante que estemos juntos en esto? Porque la región tiene que estar unida y me parece que hay mucho conocimiento en la región que todavía no está explotado comercialmente como podría ser, y esta es la mejor manera de hacerlo.
Tenemos la proyección de cada año generar y compartir nuevas experiencias entre aquellos que contribuyen a la innovación. Queremos cambiar el cómo lo hemos estado haciendo en Latinoamérica. Queremos generar la unión de los países, queremos colaborar.
Our virtual platform on technology foresight, Prospecta Americas, will support OAS member states in identifying and mapping future trends and technological development of critical importance for the Americas.
Este esfuerzo, el cual viene siendo apoyado por la Organización de los Estados Americanos, nos permitirá tener una gran información para poder mapear estas iniciativas de innovación y poder que ellas contribuyan al crecimiento económico, a la competitividad y al bienestar de nuestras naciones.
Como bien sabemos, nos encontramos ya en la cuarta revolución industrial, la que está cambiando rápidamente la forma en que se hace negocios, se produce, se consume y se genera bienestar y entretenimiento en el mundo. Es la mayor amenaza, tal vez la mejor oportunidad que tenemos en nuestras naciones.
The Inter-American Teacher Education Network, the I-10, is working to improve the quality of teachers with an emphasis on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. In 2019, the I-10 launched the first STEM Teacher Fellowship of the Americas. The Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas, ECPA, is working with governments in the Caribbean to advance electric mobility and clean transport as the sub-region pursues energy independence. Under our Integrated Water Resources Management Program, SETI is responding to the demand of member states for platforms and applications that enable data-driven policies. In the Central American region, for example, we are expanding the scope of Costa Rica's Plataforma Interactiva de Aplicación del Clima Tropical. This tool captures and disseminates real-time climate and water data, promoting resilient agriculture. The Inter-American Committee on Ports is building human and institutional capacity through public-private partnerships to address port modernization, logistics, and security. CooperaNet, SETI's multi-stakeholder platform for cooperation and partnerships, is being relaunched in 2019, responding to member states' call for a more robust hub for cooperation. In a region where 8 out of 10 consumers begin or end their shopping process online, SETI has entered into a partnership with the private sector.
Es una herramienta que sin duda acerca a las MIPYMES hacia la demanda que hoy está migrando a Internet, y con eso pretendemos mejorar las ventas y el posicionamiento de las empresas pequeñas.
As we look to the future, the Executive Secretariat for Integral Development will continue to leverage cooperation and partnerships to expand our reach, proving that together we are much more than the sum of our 34 member states.
Me and my kids have been there for over an year right now. And children are friends. It doesn't matter where they come from.
nosotros estamos en una zona netamente selvática. La línea de adyacencia va desde el norte hasta el sur, va desde Modesto Méndez hasta Aguas Turbias, tanto en el norte como en el sur. Esta línea tiene 215 kilómetros de extensión.
De allí vino él, se buscó creo con los de la OEA y de allí vino el proyecto para acá, para Judá. Y fue que lo dieron el terreno y lo dieron todo lo que era mano de obra y el material para hacer las casas que están ahorita. Y por ese motivo estamos aquí viviendo todavía.
La misión continúa trabajando en la implementación de medidas de fomento de la confianza mientras aguarda el resultado del reclamo que está atendiendo la Corte Internacional de Justicia por la disputa marítima, territorial e insular. Nuestra oficina en la zona de adyacencia realiza verificaciones a solicitud de ambos gobiernos, facilita reuniones y patrullajes conjuntos entre las Fuerzas Armadas y promueve una cultura de paz y cooperación entre las comunidades locales.
Children will be children and they have harmony. They don't see each other as a different country, but they see each other that they're growing together.
Este video fue producido con la ayuda financiera de la Unión Europea.
Hoy, esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos, no podemos ser neutrales.
than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
SETI's results for 2018 proves our effectiveness as a development partner, placing people at the center of our work and leveraging partnerships and cooperation to transform policy imperatives into action. With an eye on the rapidly changing global context, SETI is innovating to constructively address the emerging challenges and opportunities for the region. As part of our competitiveness program, SETI is designing precise tools to assess assets and capabilities in the productive sector to determine paths towards higher value goods and services. As our flagship program for partnerships, the Americas Competitiveness Exchange on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, the OAS, will continue to leverage good practices and the power of networks to increase trade and investment in the region.
For us, the role of the OAS is very important, connecting countries, connecting governments and private sector, and letting us know what other countries are doing it and how we can replicate that in our country.
Good morning, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, permanent and alternate representatives, permanent observers, and again, Mr. Secretary General and Mr. Assistant Secretary General. The quorum having been verified by the Secretariat, I have the honor to declare this regular meeting of the Permanent Council open. Dear colleagues, in accordance with Article 43 of the Rules of Procedure, I submit for your consideration the draft order of business contained in document CP OD 2319/21. There being no observations, and therefore we consider it adopted. The next item is presentation of the final report of the electoral observation missions of the OAS carried out in the Dominican Republic for the municipal elections held on 5 July 2020. At the request of the Secretary General and contained in document CP 8939/21. The report of the Electoral Observation Mission in the Dominican Republic was distributed to the delegations as document CP Doc 5694/21. On September 17, 2019, the General Secretariat received an official invitation from the Central Electoral Board of the Dominican Republic to deploy electoral observation missions for the municipal elections scheduled for February 16, 2020, and the presidential, senatorial, and congressional elections originally set for May 17, 2020. In those polls, which were ultimately held on March 15 and July 5, 2020 respectively, Dominicans elected the President of the Republic, senators, deputies, as well as mayors, directors, and other municipal officials. The Chief of Mission, His Excellency Eduardo Frei Ruiz Tagle, former President of the Republic of Chile, will deliver a summary of the report. Very warm welcome to you, President Frei, to the Permanent Council of the OAS, and you have the floor, sir. Madam President, perhaps we can move on to the next agenda item because the President has been unable to connect thus far. I have been informed by the Secretariat that there are connection issues with President Frei. Therefore, the Chair proposes we move to the next agenda item, and we will return afterwards to item 2. Under item 3, World Autism Awareness Day. Distinguished colleagues, we will now proceed with the commemoration of World Autism Awareness Day in response to the request made by the Permanent Mission of El Salvador on behalf of the OAS Group of Friends of Persons with Disabilities, composed by the delegations of Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Costa Rica, Ecuador, El Salvador, United States, Guatemala, Mexico, Panama, Peru, Uruguay, and Venezuela. In note CP 8937/21. As the delegations are aware, the United Nations General Assembly, by Resolution 62/139 of December 18, 2007, proclaimed April 2 of each year as World Autism Awareness Day, and has since encouraged member states to adopt all necessary measures to raise awareness about the situation of children with autism in our societies, including at the family level. Esteemed colleagues, to begin this commemoration, I offer the floor first to Commissioner Edgar Stuardo Ralón Orellana, Rapporteur on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. Commissioner Ralón, you are welcome to the Permanent Council and have the floor. Good morning. It is a pleasure to represent the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights in my position as rapporteur of the rights of persons with disabilities in the framework of this World Autism Awareness Day taking place in the OAS Permanent Council session. On behalf of the Commission, I greet the Secretary Almagro, the Assistant Secretary General, and you also, Ambassador Elisa Ruiz Diaz Barreiro, representative of Paraguay and Chair, and Ms. Wendy Acevedo, interim representative of the state of El Salvador, and my colleagues, panelists, as well as the honorable delegations of OAS member states and other participants. It is an honor for the Commission to have the opportunity to present some aspects about the challenges of people presenting autism characteristics, and doing so from the point of view of human rights. In addition to giving visibility to the needs of groups that are in historical conditions of vulnerability, I'd like to point out that these days for commemoration lead us to think about the transformative power that inclusion and diversity play in the inter-American society. To begin, I'd like to share some of the work carried out by the Commission as to the rights of people with disabilities. Based on the principles of equality and non-discrimination, the rights of persons with disabilities are recognized in most important instruments of the Inter-American system. Furthermore, in 1999, the Inter-American Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities was adopted. This is the first international instrument having to do specifically with the rights of persons with disabilities. In recent years, the Commission has been tackling the special vulnerability situation of persons with disabilities in the Americas through the request of precautionary measures, request by countries. The Commission has looked at the many challenges facing persons with disabilities for their recognition and guarantee of their rights, particularly having to do with the exercise of their legal capacity. With approval of the 2017-2021 strategic plan, the Commission identified the situation of human rights of persons with disabilities as one of the priority work areas. In this framework, in February 2019, the Office of the Rapporteur was created, having to do with the rights of persons with disabilities. The Commission has thus been helping create the technical and institutional capacity needed to defend the rights of persons with disabilities. In the past 10 years, the Commission held 19 thematic hearings on the rights of people with disabilities, both at state level in the region as well as through approval of the public strategic plan. 9 press releases have been issued having to do with the rights of these individuals. Given the activity carried out given the pandemic for COVID-19, the Commission pointed out that persons with disabilities have a probability of facing situations of discrimination resulting in worse health conditions and greater difficulty to obtain appropriate care in accordance with their specific needs. The Commission believes that in the context of the pandemic, access to information is fundamental for persons with disabilities to adopt the necessary prevention and treatment on an equal footing with other people. In addition, people with disabilities who might be imprisoned or might be in institutions such as psychiatric ones, the Commission points out that they are at special risk. Furthermore, it noted that these centers are characterized by high levels of overcrowding and substantial scarcity, making it difficult to access health and appropriate nutrition. Given the social model for disability, the Commission urged states in the region to promote policies for deinstitutionalization with a human rights focus so that persons with disability may live autonomously and independently. Furthermore, the Commission reiterated the importance for persons with disabilities to be involved in processes having to do with their rights and that they participate in the design, execution, monitoring, and dissemination in the context of pandemic. The Commission recalls that people with disabilities must be able to exercise their rights in equal conditions, therefore calls upon states to adopt special measures to guarantee the exercise of their legal capacity and redouble efforts to build an effective support system based on the social models for disability. In the framework of planning its work in 2021, the Commission proposed a report be drafted having to do with the legal capacity of persons with disability, which is understood not only as the capacity to hold titles, deeds, and obligations, but also implies the possibility of exercising these rights and contract obligations. With regard specifically to the rights of people with autism disorders, the Commission recalls that these individuals must be accepted, welcomed, and respected as part of human diversity. In keeping with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the Commission points out that autistic persons must be considered as subject of rights, and any treatment afforded must receive their consent. Thus, the Commission recalls that persons with disabilities, including autistic persons, must exercise their rights in equal conditions. To this effect, the Commission urges the states of the region to adopt special measures to guarantee the exercise of legal capacity and promote the building of support systems. The Commission furthermore considers that in order to guarantee the rights of persons with autistic disorders, it is necessary to strengthen these through training of staff at the institutions tied to guaranteeing human rights. With regards to the right to health, it's important to recognize that autistic persons continue tackling tremendous problems and difficulties to access health services, and when they can access them, they are not actually in accordance with their characteristics and needs. Moreover, the Commission underscores the importance of guaranteeing the right to education of autistic individuals. This right refers at the primary level of education as well as secondary and even tertiary education. The Commission believes that the exercise of this right should not be restricted. Lastly, I'd like to focus on the importance for persons with disabilities to live a life with dignity, independence, and participation in society. It is therefore necessary for states to strengthen public policies to ensure the access of persons with disabilities to services and facilities that are open to the general public, such as parks, gyms, public transport, etc. I'd like to end by once again thanking the invitation of the group of OAS group of friends and reaffirm the commitment of the Commission to the human rights of people with autism and the willingness of the Commission to contribute to the efforts of states in this matter through its tools for technical cooperation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner. I now offer the floor. We're going to have a presentation of a video by Mrs. Claribel Castillo Barrientos de Martinez, President of the National Council for the Attention of Persons with Disabilities of Guatemala. Secretariat, could you please show the video? Warm greetings from the National Council for the Attention of Persons with Disabilities, CONADI, of Guatemala. It is a privilege to address the chair of the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States, the Secretary General, and member states. CONADI, as a government entity responsible for complying with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, recognize that persons with autism is a group of population that has been greatly impacted by the pandemic because they are unable to comply with the protocols for their security. Furthermore, the processes for education, therapy, and leisure have been interrupted. In this context, the crisis must be seen as an opportunity for research and enforcement of ICTs to generate educational resources that will be helpful to children, adolescents, and adults with autism. Furthermore, programs and plans for labor inclusion should be developed based on the skills and capabilities of persons with autism as part of the economic reactivation to be carried out by the different agencies and areas that can generate jobs, and this should be done in consultation with persons with disability. This phase of COVID-19 post-pandemic must be seen as an opportunity for educational and labor inclusion. CONADI working together for full participation.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask the delegation of Guatemala to convey our thanks and appreciation to Ms. Castillo Barrientos de Martinez for her participation this morning. Next, following the established order, we will watch video testimonials from Ezequiel Raskolnikov, Analia Infante, and Constanza Posati, who are representatives of Insurgencia Autista, the only civil society organization in Argentina formed by people with autism. I would ask the Secretariat to please play the video. Hello, good morning. My name is Ezequiel. I'm here with my colleagues Analia and Constanza. Our organization stems from the fact that there is a need to address what it is like to really be autistic. We have awareness raising campaigns, and we focus heavily on what we need from society. We have spaces to exchange information on this topic and develop strategies. As you know, it is very difficult for autistic persons to get a diagnosis, so we have to have specialists on this topic. I'll now give the floor to my colleagues. Hello, my name is Analia. I have been diagnosed with autism. I went to neurologists, I went to psychologists, and had different kinds of treatments over the course of 7 years before I got my diagnosis. This led to great frustrations in my education, not because I had difficulty learning, but rather because I had difficulty adapting to the idiosyncrasies of every person I was working with. Different forums require people to adapt to that space and adapt to the rules that are specific to that unique environment. And taking into account the specific needs of all of the different people I was working with was very difficult. It was very difficult to spend 4 hours with other people. In our education and work lives, people try to do us a favor and tell us, do what you can. And that it would be good for us to adapt to that environment, when really the right thing to say is not, you can do it, but rather, let's look at how you can do this. I work in a less social way. I work from home. I am very capable of reading and studying, but I have great difficulty spending 4 hours dealing with a sensorial and social difficulty, or the sensorial and social difficulties that I face in an institutional learning environment. Although sometimes we have particular intellectual facilities, or we have lots of knowledge about specific areas, there really isn't an appropriate opportunity for our social profile and for us to perform as well as possible. Hello, my name is Constanza, and as Analia said, I also had difficulty going through the educational system. However, luckily I was able to finish my studies and graduate. Today I am a university student. And thankfully, I have been able to survive in the working environment. I used to have standard jobs with very long hours, jobs that demanded a lot of social interaction and a large workload. The standard in our society is 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and to do that while having contact with other human beings can be extremely difficult for us. However, in my current job that I've had for a decade now is talk about what I like, I convey information about topics that I'm interested in, and I do it fewer hours a week. I think that it can be very advantageous for us to be able to focus on very specific areas of our interest in the work environment. If it weren't for that, I wouldn't be able to access the professional environment. I have to be able to do what I like. When we do what we like, we have a very impressive ability to work. In fact, sometimes it's difficult for us to stop working, specifically because we're so passionate about whatever it is that we choose to do. I thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak, and see you next time. Thank you very much to the OAS group of friends of persons with disabilities. Thank you for allowing us to see and hear these testimonials this morning. I would also like to ask the delegation of Argentina to please convey our compliments and our appreciation to the organization Insurgencia Autista, and particularly to our speakers Ezequiel, Analia, and Constanza. Next, before offering the floor to delegations, I would like to give the floor to Ambassador Carlos Játiva, Permanent Representative of Ecuador, so that he can read the joint statement of the OAS group of friends of persons with disabilities on the occasion of World Autism Awareness Day. Ambassador Játiva, you have the floor. Chair. Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to speak on behalf of the OAS group of friends of persons with disabilities as we celebrate World Autism Awareness Day. This day is celebrated every April 2nd based on an OAS, or rather of a United Nations resolution from 2007. People on the spectrum face severe discrimination when it comes to accessing their rights and having equal opportunities as well as fully participating in society. The main barrier for persons with autism stems from social and behavioral phenomena. Right now, we are seeing that persons with disabilities and persons with autism in a post-COVID-19 pandemic context or during a pandemic context are having additional challenges. During this pandemic, their difficulties are aggravated, so we have to address diversity in the measures that we take to stimulate the global economy. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the Inter-American Convention on the Eradication of All Forms of Discrimination Against Persons with Disability, and particularly the Program of Action for the Rights and Dignity of Persons with Disability, establish among their objectives that we must ensure the full decent remuneration for persons with disabilities in the public and private sector. They should be based on professional and technical training, as well as focus on equal opportunity and creating accessible work environments based on the internal regulations of every country. They need to be provided with whatever adjustments are necessary for them. As work is a key part of daily life, it allows people to be integrated into their communities as they develop independence and autonomy. Additionally, work recognizes the merits and capabilities of each person to contribute to society. Persons with autism need to receive the necessary support and be granted proper adjustments so that they can access work on an even playing field with others. With that in mind, we invite the member states, the private sector, and other social actors to develop or strengthen programs that provide access to education, inclusive hiring programs, and other elements that provide labor equality for persons with autism and related conditions, taking into account the opportunities that can stem from alternative work arrangements, including telework arrangements and access to new technologies. Today, we have a historic opportunity to build a more inclusive, accessible world in which persons with disabilities, including persons with autism, can have full, equal access to open, inclusive, and accessible work environments in which they can enjoy all of their rights without discrimination and have a decent, dignified life with equal opportunities. Thank you very much, Chair. Ambassador, thank you. I now give the floor to any delegations who would like to make remarks about this topic. The Ambassador of Haiti, please. Ambassador Edmund Boschit.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. The delegation of Haiti feels great pleasure as we, the member states of this organization, celebrate the World Awareness Day for Autism. We would like to congratulate the missions who made it possible to include this important item on our agenda. Autism is quite extensive throughout the world, but not very well known, and it is a public health problem in so many countries. Madam Chair, my delegation thanks you for convening this session to raise awareness amongst the delegations of the organization as to this behavioral disorder that affects 1 out of 50 people throughout the world. There are many people in Haiti, and most of them being indigenous. This commemoration is, for me, as permanent representative of the Republic of Haiti, very personal, because as father of a young autist boy, I live this situation on a daily basis. I dream to see greater awareness about autism, and in particular acceptance of autistic children, not as abnormal, just simply different. The disorders in the autistic spectrum, as they are called, impact the care of these individuals from their youngest age. Autism is classified in the same spectrum as Asperger's, it is necessary to recognize that a person living with autism must be accepted, and we have to make sure that they are cared for. Symptoms varying from person to person. Nonetheless, there are behavioral disorders, cognitive weaknesses that are a fact of life for them. These are persons with an insufficient visual contact, inappropriate social interaction at times. The main symptom is nonetheless to be very introverted. Autism is indeed a concern for all countries of the world as well as all those in our region. It is a burden, in particular for low-income countries. Taking care of people living with the spectrum of autism is difficult in our countries. There's very little information available in Haiti on the matter. There are cultural difficulties, and the cost for consultation and support of the people in this spectrum. Specialized schools are also scarce. Indeed, there is one special education school in my country which is not accessible to many. So to care for these people is teamwork. They need to be psychologists in addition to support of other professionals to work on their speaking skills. And the interpreter regrets, but there's a lot of sound interruption. The connection is very poor with the ambassador. They have difficulty in expressing themselves clearly and with ease. There are specialists also to help in the development and adaptation of children so that they can be involved in society. Madam Chair, on a regional scale, only solidarity will allow us to effectively fight the problems caused by the autistic spectrum. My country reiterates its support for the Inter-American System institutions and renews its confidence in their ability to use good synergies to face the challenge and concerns of this region as posed by autism. In conclusion, my delegation welcomes the direct interaction of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights because the link that exists between combating this health problem and the rights of human beings are close. My delegation also wishes that we have recommendations from the Commission issued to the member states in order to tackle this tremendous challenge. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Ambassador Edmond, thank you very much. And I send lots of strength your way. I thank the delegations who have taken the floor to touch on World Autism Awareness Day. And of course, I thank the delegations who requested the inclusion of this item on the agenda. At this point, we will go back to item 2 on the order of business, which was the final report of the electoral observation mission deployed in the Dominican Republic. Secretary, I would ask if President Frey is available. He is connected, Chair. Mr. President, could you please request the floor? President Frey, welcome to the Organization of American States Permanent Council. At this point, I give you the floor. Good morning to you. President, you are muted. You are muted. you have to hit the blue button that has a microphone image on it to unmute. We still are not able to hear you, sir. At the bottom of your screen, the button in the middle. Not yet. We still see you as being muted. No, President, we cannot hear you. Would you please be able to refresh your browser? You can use the round arrow at the upper left-hand part of your browser. I think that's what you need to do, because I tried to open up your microphone from my end as well, and I was not able to do so. At the upper left-hand side of the browser, right where you see the web address, there's a round circle, a circle with an arrow. If you could push that to refresh, please. Now you have to push the two buttons at the bottom of your screen in the middle. No, the right microphone is not selected. Okay, he is refreshing to see if he will be able to connect. Can you hear me now? Yes, Mr. President, now we can. Well, it's been a little tough. How about that? I'm sorry for that situation. We've had a widespread internet outage in this area. In our home, we have the triple pack, which includes internet, phone, and TV, and we've been struggling with it for about 3 hours now. In any case, getting started, I would like to thank Ambassador Elisa Ruiz-Diaz, Chair of the Permanent Council. I would like to recognize Mr. Luis Almagro, the Secretary General, who gave us his trust to carry out this mission. I would like to thank the Assistant Secretary General, as well as the permanent representatives and observer states. Ladies and gentlemen, democracy in the Dominican Republic face unprecedented challenges in the recent history of its country. After Election Day on February 16th, 2020, when there was a suspension, and then after the special municipal elections were held, which required great technical and political effort, this issue was overcome. On the other hand, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, just a few weeks later, presidential and legislative elections had to be postponed in order to ensure the well-being of the population. This placed great amounts of pressure on the electoral process, and this led to great difficulty complying with constitutionally mandated periods. In this context, the OAS carried out 3 electoral observation missions, which witnessed the civic spirit of the population and the vocation of Dominican authorities to carry out the process properly. I would like to commend the Dominican Republic on overcoming these challenges and carrying out an electoral process that led to a peaceful transfer of power. I would also like to recognize President-elect Luis Abinader, who was elected with 52.52% of the validly issued votes, as well as all of the candidates elected at a local and municipal level. It was very important to certify this process and prove that the country continued to function properly. The mission acknowledges the efforts made by Dominican society to continue honing its electoral legal framework. For example, the law on parties, groupings, and peaceful movements adopted in 2018, and the 2019 law on the electoral system. We also commend the Dominican Republic on incorporating in its new legislation several recommendations issued in previous OAS electoral observation missions, as well as the initiatives they took to welcome the OAS officials. In this presentation, I will touch on some of the main findings and recommendations issued by the electoral observation mission. And as you know, the report can be found on the website if you would like to see the full report. In terms of the organization of the elections, starting in October 2019, during primary elections, Dominican authorities organized 4 electoral processes in under 10 months. The experience acquired during this whole process was key to holding the March and July elections after the political crisis, and given the health situation. That is why the mission visited twice in person, and the third time we were not able to do so. So we had to carry that out virtually. And we worked with a small group of specialists from the OAS who were able to travel there. Most of us were not even able to go and be there in person. In terms of the organization of the elections, I would also like to say that all of these elections led to an accumulation of experience, and that was key in order to carry out in-person elections properly. However, the mission also saw a lack of uniformity across election protocols, especially at the municipal level. For that reason, we recommend that the procedures implemented at the different phases of elections be harmonized. This includes harmonizing national and municipal procedures, as well as creating an internal evaluation system to detect opportunities for improvement. All of that will take place through cooperation between the OAS and the Dominican Republic. In terms of electoral technology, the failed implementation of automated voting during the elections reflected a series of problems related to election technology. The mission noted that there was no exhaustive protocol on tests and creating quality control systems. These findings were quickly confirmed by an audit carried out by an OAS technical team. Election day was very complicated, and the next day, the Secretary General, Luis Almagro, agreed to send a specific OAS team to look at that particular technological issue, because the Dominican Republic was trying to vote almost exclusively through this technology that did not end up working. Based on what was observed, particularly by that specialized team, we recommend implementing formal mechanisms to update software, carry out source code and operations tests, improve software freezing issues, and protocol to zero and backup databases. We also recommend the implementation of a formal policy for the development of a process to document the implementation of each technology solution. Lastly, we recommend the implementation of an incident management system to address any attacks or incidents that may jeopardize the entire process.
Another crucial aspect is the effective participation of women. The mission promotes the different actions carried out by international organizations to promote political participation by women in the Dominican Republic. There are regulations, but these regulations have not broken the persistence of limitations and asymmetries that Dominican women must address when they are fighting against the men in the political contest. The lack of advance of female candidates shows the need to have greater measures to guarantee that the law is complied with, moving towards from a formal commitment to a material commitment with equitable participation of women in politics. That is why we recommend that the be enforcement of the law, and then to adopt measures such as having women nominated into single candidate positions that are up for election. And what is very important, parties must ensure within their budget that in all electoral periods that there be funds set aside to promote the participation of women. With the current situation, we will not achieve greater participation by women. With regards to political finances, the mission was able to verify that the chief challenge when it comes to political financing lies in the effective implementation and compliance with existing standards. The mission observed that there is no real control nor audit of the political organization finances, nor in the candidacies, despite it being so ordered by law. And electoral campaigns in general received large sums of money. It is therefore recommended to build the capacity of the Special Financial Control Unit of the Central Electoral Board, providing it with the economic resources, human capital, and sufficient institutional capacity to allow them to action. There should also be precautionary measures and sanctions when to ensure the guarantee of compliance with the political electoral financing standards. Lastly, there should be software developed aiming to facilitate the development of budgets and presentation of reports on income and expenditures for the campaign of political organization and candidacies. This will promote transparency and control, and therefore this tool ought to be made available to the public. It should be open source. With regards to electoral justice, and this is an aspect that we consider to be crucial, the OAS has been witness of efforts for continuous reform undertaken by the Dominican Republic to strengthen its electoral justice system. Nonetheless, in both processes, the mission was able to verify the existence of challenges, in particular when it comes to distribution of jurisdictions between different judicial entities and the capacities available to the electoral criminal prosecution system. In order to strengthen Dominican electoral justice system, it is recommended to ensure the exclusive competence of the Supreme Electoral Court. It does exist, but it doesn't have the infrastructure, doesn't have the financial and human resources needed to discharge its duties in its capacity as only organ that can verify constitutionality and legality of any act that is ordered by the Central Electoral Board on any aspect having to do with electoral organization. It is further recommended to reform the regulatory and organizational framework of the Office of the Special Prosecutor. The appointment, tenure, and exercise of duties must be independent when it comes to political power. Furthermore, it should be autonomous and have a sufficient budget. Obviously, this is something that was not available to the electoral process. We should also appreciate having an independent regulatory and organic framework for the Office of the Special Prosecutor of the Republic, because otherwise there is an overlap, and then the entities that should act, and especially electoral justice, cannot function properly. We would like to thank, first of all, the Central Electoral Board and the Supreme Electoral Court for their openness and collaboration with the mission. We first worked with Dr. Julio César Castaños, and at the Central Electoral Board we worked with Roman Jaques, who precisely after working at the Supreme Electoral Court, took over as chair of the Central Electoral Board. We wish him good success and will do everything in our power to facilitate that these recommendations that are in the document, and it is a complete file of all the processes, and the OAS will work towards ensuring that this can be implemented to help the legislation. We would also like to thank all the state institutions, government authorities, both outgoing and incoming, the political parties, social actors, academics, and businesses that met with the mission and even helped us throughout the entire week. We were there until the process ended quite peacefully and the new authorities were able to take office. Let me also thank the public entities that and law enforcement that ensured the safety of the mission. We'd also thank the Special Ambassador of the Dominican Republic, José Fiallo, who provided full support and made arrangements for the mission to be able to work, especially as we had to leave after the March observation mission. There are a number of countries that I need to thank also because they made valuable contributions, sometimes financial, making it possible to deploy the mission throughout the territory. We covered the entire territory, not only the capital, but it was nationwide. The countries that contributed the most, and I'd like to thank them, are Germany, Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Korea, Spain, United States, France, Guatemala, Italy, Mexico, Netherlands, and Panama. There is a long history of collaboration when it comes to elections between the Dominican Republic and the OAS, confirmed yet again with the new government that makes it possible to continue deploying efforts. It's not that the mission goes and ends there. No, we need to continue supporting all the legal and administrative processes so that all the actions seen in these three processes can then be extended to the complete development. This will contribute to the ongoing effort for democratic strengthening throughout the continent. I'd like to greet Madam Chair, the Secretary General, and tell them that for me, well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your confidence in trusting me as the President of the mission. I'd like to thank all those who supported me. And when the pandemic hit, it really impacted the mission. I think that the lesson we can draw from this is that it is extremely important for these OAS missions to be carried out when there are elections in Latin America. Without presence of such missions, it's not possible to ensure transparency and efficiency of all electoral processes. I know that many countries don't accept OAS missions. Others accept a different kind of mission, because the OAS from missions are institutional. They sometimes accept some parties to attend, but the OAS mission is an institutional mission that works with the outgoing government and the incoming government in order to ensure a peaceful, orderly, transparent process in providing security to citizens, and that the electoral outcomes are made available on time without waiting 15 or sometimes even a month for the final decisions to be made public. I do believe that these missions ultimately, with whatever qualifiers you want to add, they do help strengthen democracy in our America. Unfortunately, it is not always seen clearly. There are a number of electoral processes ongoing. They're all extremely important. And this mission that is given by the Secretary General to a group of individuals, some of us are political leaders, others are specialists of different systems, electoral, financial systems, or whatever is needed. Also, the office of mayors. We see elections for different positions in so many of our countries. But ultimately, with a good OAS mission, with support from the OAS, with support from all the countries, we will achieve better democracies, more peaceful countries with governments able to discharge their duties. Therefore, I'd like to thank all the authorities, all the permanent ambassadors, and the Secretary General with whom we have met and discussed frequently at Miami and elsewhere, talking about issues relating to Latin America. So thanks for this opportunity, and I remain available at all times to contribute and to work with the organization, its General Secretariat and Permanent Council, that this may help us learn. And unfortunately, we have seen this during the pandemic. We need to work united. Latin America or the Americas cannot think that their problems can be solved country by country when it comes to issues such as vaccines, pandemics. Before, there was competition and discussion between the countries instead of collaborating, seeing what one country needed, what another could provide to help out, because the major procurement of vaccines in the world has been difficult. Had we gone in as a united Latin America, we would have been able to purchase all those vaccines, have them available and ready. But instead of that, we were fighting between the countries to see what's better, what's worse, trying to criticize one another. That's necessary, and I get carried away with all of this because I really believe that without true integration, we need to work together to end poverty, to move towards development that is needed for Latin America to grow. Once again, I'd like to thank you and remain available. The entire mission action is available to work with OAS, and we thank all the sectors, all the parties, all the institutions for their broad support, and we'd really spent a very enjoyable and interesting time in the Dominican Republic. No doors were shut in our face. Our mission was truly realistic, was transparent, and there are lessons learned for the future of that country and all the other countries. Thank you, Secretary General. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the permanent representatives and observers of the OAS. On behalf of the Permanent Council, I thank former President Eduardo Frei, Chief of the Electoral Observation Missions in the Dominican Republic, for this report. I now offer the floor to delegations that would like to comment on this matter. I see Ambassador Josué Fiadio from the Dominican Republic asking for the floor. Ambassador, you have the floor. Please go ahead. Good morning, Madam Chair of the Permanent Council, Ms. Elisa Ruiz Diaz, Permanent Representative of Paraguay to the OAS, Secretary General of the OAS, Luis Almagre, Assistant Secretary General, Nestor Mendez, Mr. Eduardo Frei, former President of the Republic of Chile, dear colleagues and ambassadors. The delegation of the Dominican Republic wishes to thank the Honorable Mr. Eduardo Frei Ruiz Tagle, former President of the Republic of Chile, for the presentation of the final report of the OAS Electoral Observation Mission for the municipal elections of in 2019 and 2020, presidential, mayoral, and also representatives that took place in the Dominican Republic. Special thanks to the OAS mission, given the COVID-19 pandemic and the health emergency that was prevailing at the time. They were required to make tremendous efforts to observe our elections. On 17 September 2019, the General Secretariat of the OAS received an official invitation by the Central Electoral Board of our country to send electoral observation missions for the municipal and presidential elections, as well as those of senators and deputies for last year. The Secretary General, Luis Almagro, accepted the invitation and instructed the Department for Cooperation and Electoral Observation to initiate necessary preparations and to seek external resources to finance the mission. He further appointed the former president of Chile as head of this mission. The chief matters included in the report we have just heard today are the following. First, having to do with municipal elections that were suspended from February 16, and the suspended extraordinary elections of 15 March. And second, the presidential, senator, and representative elections in their pre-electoral phase, plus electoral and post-electoral phases. And third, the findings and recommendations in areas such as the electoral legal framework, electoral organization, technology employed, political participation by women, political financing, and electoral justice. With regard to the 15 March mayoral elections, which took place in a complex health situation as a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic, the report points out that OAS observers went to 99 centers, visiting 435 electoral colleges in 20 provinces throughout the country and the central district. Following the OAS methodology, from the electoral colleges were observed right through to the scrutiny and conveying the results, as well as all the material distributed. The report points out that at the mayoral level, there was 81 office of mayors won by one of the electoral parties, and that includes the national district. There were 65 office of the mayor, or 41%, by the other party. The other offices of mayor were distributed amongst minority political parties. On 16 July 2020, presidential, senator, and deputy elections took place. There were 7,529,000 electors appointed or distributed throughout the different electoral colleges. There were polling stations throughout the country and also abroad. There was 51.1% of women and 49.8% men in the list of electors. 8% of the elections were held abroad. In this figure, and as we see in the last bulletin published by the Electoral Board for the presidential elections, 4,163,305 Dominican individuals voted. In this regard, 4,103,000 Dominicans were electors that cast valid ballots. In this poll, the Dominican public elected by 51.52% the candidates of the Modern and Revolutionary Party, with Mr. Luis Abinader as president and Ms. Raquel Peña as vice president. The liberal parties obtained fewer votes, followed by other parties like the Christian Party and the Country Alliance. In senatorial election, the results were the following. The Modern Revolutionary Party had 18 senators, Dominican Republic 6 senators, the Christian Reform, and 1 senator for some of the other parties. In the elections in provinces, the results were the Modern Revolutionary Party, 90 deputies, 75 deputies for the second party, and 6 deputies for the Christian and Reform, and Dominican Revolutionary Party, 3 elections. Madam Chair, when we look at the percentage of the candidates for the president for these different elections that took place on 5 July 2020 by gender, although it is true that at the level of vice presidency the female candidacy were 50% and for deputies it was close to 44%, nonetheless we note that at the level of senators it was only 12.5%. This is a challenge still faced by political parties and Dominican society. In the last 20 years, our country has had 3 female vice presidents. Let me now emphasize by the Central Electoral Board and other authorities in our country will carefully look into this matter and the specific recommendations made about the electoral framework, the organization, the use of technology, political participation by women, financing of political parties, and electoral justice, as presented by the Electoral Mission to strengthen electoral processes in the future. We also believe it is very important to look at the recommendation to continue strengthening electoral institutions by standardizing and evaluating, coordinating between institutions, establish channels for permanent communication to ensure compliance with standards, document and disseminate knowledge, generate stability and predictability. The Dominican Republic, respectful of the rights of powers and democratic institutions, has conducted transparent, open processes, consulting with the different political forces and actors to appoint the members to the Electoral Board. It has also received necessary financing to conduct its duties and to strengthen the institution. The delegation of the Dominican Republic wishes to reiterate its thanks to the Secretary General Luis Almagro for his support to the electoral processes in our country last year, as well as the Honorable Eduardo Frei Ruiz-Tagle, former President of Chile, for having led the observation mission. Lastly, on behalf of the government of people of the Dominican Republic, I'd like to thank the Organization of American States for its support for sending the electoral observation mission, recognizing the work carried out by the corresponding unit. Thanks also for the financial contributions of Germany, Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Korea, Spain, United States, France, Guatemala, Italy, Mexico, Netherlands, and Panama, which made it possible for the mission to be able to travel to the Dominican Republic and perform its duties. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I thank you, Ambassador, and I now offer the floor to the Ambassador Gustavo Tarré of Venezuela. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Warm greetings to the Secretary General and the Assistant Secretary General, as well as Mr. Eduardo Frei, former President of Chile. My delegation would like to thank the Electoral Observation Mission's report pertaining to the elections in the Dominican Republic last year. We reiterate the congratulations of Venezuela to the president who was elected through this electoral period, and all the different legislators elected for the different areas of the country. The interpreter regrets, but we have just lost the sound from Mr. Gustavo Tarré. Ambassador, we cannot hear you. And the work carried out by President Eduardo Frei Ruiz-Tagle as a leader of the mission and the corresponding unit within the OAS under Francisco Guerrero. The report presented today is a detailed report having to do with the processes that took place last year in the Dominican Republic, certifies the results of the elections as valid, and provides recommendations to be implemented in order to improve elections in the country. Beginning in 2018, the Department for Electoral Cooperation has carried out over 25 observation missions to monitor different types of elections. In 2 cases, the observation missions were unable to certify the electoral results due to irregularities in counting the votes or conveying the results. This means that the electors who participated in the other 23 elections observed by the mission can be assured that the elections were conducted in a proper way. And this has been clearly stated by President Frei. The EOM is an essential service for democracy in the region by guaranteeing the legitimacy of elections and offering recommendations so that electoral authorities in each country may implement necessary reforms. For this reason, that we look with great skepticism that any government that for any reason refuses to accept an OAS mission. What do these missions guarantee? Well, that the expression of the popular will is properly reflected in electoral results announced by impartial authorities. They must also be reliable and transparency, that everybody can exercise the right to vote. Citizens meeting the requirements may freely apply as candidates, that any political party can carry out activities, that there is participation of the media, that public funds are not used to support certain candidates, that there is no pressure on public officials or beneficiaries of social programs, and lastly, and equally important, that there not be any political prisoners. For all these conditions to be met, the first requirement is to have transparent, independent elections. This is asked by all Venezuelan democratic parties for any elections that may take in our country. And it needs to exist in each one of the countries members of OAS. Free elections is something called on for by most of Venezuelan citizens. Hopefully, in the not too distant future, we may hear the report of an electoral observation mission of the OAS that has monitored free, fair, transparent elections in Venezuela. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Ahora, el embajador Hugh Hatzett de Canadá. Embajador, por favor.
Thank you, Mr. Ture. I give the floor to Canada.
Signore Presidente, good morning, colleagues, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, His Excellency Eduardo Frei, former President of Chile. I will speak this morning first in French and then in English after that. Les élections municipales et présidentielles de 2020 en République dominicaine.
The municipal elections held in the Dominican Republic were recently held. This took place during an urgent situation created by the COVID-19 situation. We applaud the excellent work done by the OAS Electoral Observation Mission in these elections. We highlight the efforts made by the Dominican authorities to carry out these elections and to ensure that the democratic rights of the Dominican people were guaranteed.
For elections, as well as initiatives to increase the political participation of women. As the report notes, there are a number of areas which can be addressed in order to improve the administration of elections in the Dominican Republic, including reforms to political party financing, a need to clarify the mandates and responsibilities of electoral agencies, and better training for polling station officers. Canada would like to take this opportunity to thank the Department of Electoral Cooperation, Observation and Cooperation, as well as the head of the Electoral Observation Mission for providing this report today, and encourages the Dominican Republic to implement its important recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. I give the floor to Ambassador Washington Abdallah. Ambassador, you have the floor, please. Thank you, Chair. President Frei, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, Chair, I wish everybody a productive day. There are two issues that I feel are relevant here. This isn't something that President Frei would say himself. However, truth be told, his participation in a mission of this nature makes it even more noteworthy. We all know what Mr. Frey means in his country, and this is truly a seal of quality. The fact that he has participated in this kind of mission in the Dominican Republic is of great significance. It is a very positive thing for us. This follows the actions taken by the Secretary General to have noteworthy figures participate in these missions, which really promotes their democratic access. I feel that they really give these missions a quality seal, and that's no small thing. I was able to speak in person with President Frey at one point, and it's no news to anybody how much President Frey means to his people and what he stands for: transparency, uprightness. And unfortunately, we don't have abundant examples of this. However, we have him, and I wanted to highlight that. I would like to commend the Dominican Republic because amidst a very complicated, dramatic moment like the one that we have been living through, the Dominican Republic has made these efforts and it has done things well. This shows that when we want to move forward with our democracies, we can do it. We definitely can do it. There are those who make excuses. There are those who say for different reasons that it cannot be done. They delay democracy. But we can see that there are entities where voting is considered sacred. And without that sacred participation, we no longer have even the basic foundation of democracy. We can talk about 1,000 kinds of democracy, but if people don't vote, there is no democracy. I would also like to thank the OAS and commend the OAS on the fact that these missions are considered of the utmost priority. And they are extremely important. We have these groups with the appropriate people with expertise in elections who go to countries and evaluate and assess electoral processes. The fact that this happens is very important for democracies. Democracies must be audited or observed or reviewed in a certain way, and the best thing is to have parties come from outside of the country to do that. When we see this happen in our organization or with the European Union, we need to hail that fact that we can send those missions. There are countries that hinder the arrival or the work of electoral observation missions. And when we see that happening, we can suspect that something bizarre is happening. However, there are countries that welcome these missions and open their doors and show them everything that they are doing. And we can be sure that that is democracy. That is what I wanted to say. Thank you for that. Ambassador, thank you. I give the floor to Ambassador Maria Rocabert from Panama. Ambassador, please. Chair, thank you. Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, I'll be very brief. The delegation of Panama would like to pay compliments to His Excellency, Mr. Eduardo Frey, the former president of Chile, and the team from the Department of Electoral Cooperation, and express thanks for the final presentation of the OAS Electoral Observation Mission deployed in the Dominican Republic. In terms of the municipal elections held in March and May, and presidential elections that were held in May, we recognize the great efforts made by the Electoral Observation Mission, and we commend the Dominican Republic, its people, and its authorities for making a commitment to democracy. This commitment was extraordinary because even under the exceptional circumstances in which the elections took place due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw high voter turnout. For that reason, we recognize the unprecedented efforts made by the electoral authorities to organize elections, and we commend the civic example set by the Dominican Republic. Of course, all of our countries have efforts to make to strengthen our democracies. For that reason, the lessons learned from every election in our countries are important so that we can continue to hone our own elections. And this time around, we believe that the country will be very successful under President Luis Abinader. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. President Frey, if you would like to make any follow-up comments, I will give you the floor at this point. I would just like to thank the representatives from the different countries for their expressions of thanks and congratulations, because that is what the OAS is all about. This is an organization that represents all of us. We all need to work together to make things happen. We have to make serious commitments, and the first one of those commitments is to have free, fair, transparent elections, which is something that we've seen. There are always challenges. We saw that in the United States just a little while ago. There was a very complex situation there. And we saw that a mob attacked the Capitol, which was an unprecedented situation, at least in the history of that country. So we have to take care of democracy every day, and we do that through institutions, through political parties, through the participation of civil society. We do this with governors that respect the law of the people, and not the ones that arrive and think that they need to start from scratch all the time. All countries have their history, their reality, their challenges, and so what we need to do is provide continuity for positive processes and change the ones that are not. We also fall into populism at times. We see this happening again. Political leaders come to power and we think that we need to start everything all over again and go back to the drawing board. Our countries have histories. We have made thousands of sacrifices, built thousands of things, reached thousands of agreements. And that's how we build a better society. If everybody thinks that they come in with the absolute truth and they need to impose that on everybody, then it will be very difficult for us to make progress. That is why the institutional work that was done here is fundamental in my opinion. I think one of the large crises we're seeing in Latin America is that we don't respect our institutions, and we need to respect them. That's where the rule of law comes from. If everybody wants their own institution and doesn't respect efforts made to standardize institutions and reach a minimum level of proficiency in all areas, then we will not be able to consolidate democracy, and that will have repercussions in the economy and so on and so forth. Without integration in Latin America, there is no progress, as has been said. We have worked to make headway in this area with our last two presidential administrations in Chile. And what we see is that we have to be deeply concerned about ensuring that these processes can take place and that we have stability. Above all, we have to make sure that we can build a better future based on what we have already done. We sometimes see the same historical mistakes made again and again. In Chile, we have things happen and say, this happened 30 years ago. We need to do away with that. We need to have better institutions. We need to avoid institutions and presidents that try to be reelected indefinitely. In recent elections, in all of our countries, we've seen that political parties have very low approval levels. And this also works against the consolidation of democracy and prevents our people from having a better quality of life. It stops us from fixing the problems that we have. It creates a very complicated situation. We have the pandemic, and we will have to work very difficult to get our countries back to where they were before the pandemic. And to do that, we have to set aside all forms of nationalism, our personal egos, and we have to work for the common good. Hopefully we can learn to do that in Latin America, as we see in the European Union every day. I'm happy. I love democracy. I love to live in a democracy, experience democracy, and if I can help ensure that it exists in other countries, even better. We need to build unity so that all together we can overcome poverty, which after the pandemic will be very severe. Once again, I apologize for my internet connection. I would just reiterate that we had a big outage here in the Santiago metropolitan area, but I hope that this report has been useful to you and that it helps each and every one of our countries improve their processes using the guidelines delivered to them by the OAS. And of course, countries should work to do this on an ongoing basis. We can't just do it when elections are a month or two away. We have to make changes as we're able to, and this is a good time to do it. After this election in the Dominican Republic, everything is calm. We saw what happened. And so this would be a good time to implement recommendations so that future elections in that country will be more transparent and fair. And to avoid pessimism that people are feeling with respect to their institutions and their legislatures. Chair, thank you. Ambassadors, I appreciate your comments, especially the comments made by the ambassador of Uruguay, who congratulated us and welcomed our work. I think that's really what we need. We need to look at our country's history. We shouldn't try to start from scratch, as I said. Once again, just thank you, thank you, thank you. President, thank you. There being no further comments, the chair would move that the Permanent Council take note of the final report of the OAS Electoral Observation Mission deployed in the Dominican Republic for the municipal elections held on March 15th, 2020, and the general election held on July 5th, 2020. This report being contained in document CP Doc 5694/21. Congratulate the government and the people of the Dominican Republic on the presidential, senatorial, congressional, and municipal elections held in 2020, and extend a special thanks once again to former President Eduardo Frei, Chief of Mission, and the members of his team for their efforts on the electoral observation missions. There being no objection, it is so agreed. Agreed. Thank you very much. We will move on with the next item on the order of business, which is item 4. That is, place and date of the 51st regular session of the OAS General Assembly. We will consider the draft resolution with that title in accordance with a request made by the Permanent Mission of Guatemala, which was distributed as document CP 5693/21. To that end, I am pleased to recognize and give the floor to Ambassador Rita Claveri de Scioli, Permanent Representative of Guatemala. Ambassador, you have the floor. Chair, thank you. The delegation of Guatemala expresses its thanks for the inclusion of the consideration of the draft agenda called Place and Date of the 51st Regular Session of the OAS General Assembly on today's order of business. This is document CP/Doc 5693/21. This document determines that the OAS General Assembly, which will be held on the 10th, 11th, and 12th of November 2021 in Guatemala City, and this will be an in-person meeting. We also ask the Secretary General to send this resolution to the appropriate organs and entities of the organization. The draft resolution presented by Guatemala at this council is based on Resolution AG Res 2964 L-0/20 adopted by the 50th regular session of the General Assembly held on October 20th and 21, 2020 in Washington, D.C. in the United States of America, and which was also the first virtual General Assembly held in the history of this organization. Through that resolution, the General Assembly accepts the offer made by Mr. Pedro Glorovila, Foreign Minister of Guatemala, for Guatemala to host this year's meeting. Chair. For Guatemala, offering to be the headquarters of this, or the host of this important meeting, is part of our commitment to multilateralism and the principles of the OAS Democratic Charter, which seeks to create peace and justice, establish solid democracies, and promote collaboration between the different states of the Americas. The 51st regular session of the OAS General Assembly is particularly important for Guatemala, especially because we will be celebrating the 200th year anniversary of Central American independence. That is 200 years of having independent Republican governments. This is also the year of the 56th anniversary of SICA and the 35th anniversary of the signing of peace agreements and the consolidation of peace and democracy in our region. We also celebrate the 20th anniversary of the adoption of the Inter-American Democratic Charter. Chair, on behalf of the government of Mr. Alejandro Giammattei, the President of Guatemala, my delegation expresses thanks for the trust placed in my country by the member states of this organization. My government reiterates that we will remain optimistic about the future of this organization as we hold the General Assembly this year, and we are aware of our responsibility to meet this important commitment in the face of the large challenges that the COVID-19 pandemic continues to pose in our region. Guatemala will work as hard as it can to ensure that the General Assembly is held successfully by permanently monitoring the situation of the pandemic. The goal of all this is to ensure that we comply with the health recommendations issued to avoid the transmission of COVID-19. For Guatemala City, it will be an honor to receive each and every one of you and your delegations in the country of the eternal spring. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to you, Ambassador. I give the floor to Ambassador Alejandra Solano from Costa Rica. Thank you very much, Chair. It is a pleasure to pay you compliments and to greet the Secretary General and the Assistant Secretary General, as well as all of the distinguished representatives who are here with us at today's meeting. We would like to thank Her Excellency Rita Claverie de Scioli, Permanent Representative of Guatemala to the OAS, for presenting the draft resolution titled Place and Date of the 51st regular session of the OAS General Assembly, which establishes the deadlines by which we must conclude the work of this body, the Inter-American Commission, the Inter-American Council for Integral Development, and other OAS bodies. We thank the people and government of Guatemala for the hospitality we're sure they will show us, and this meeting to be held on the 10th, 11th, and 12th of November in person in Guatemala City will surely be very productive for all of us. Chair, with your permission, we would request that this draft resolution be adopted by acclamation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador. I submit Costa Rica's request for your consideration. Since I see no requests for the floor, this draft resolution is adopted by acclamation. The draft resolution being titled Place and Date of the 51st Regular Session of the OAS General Assembly, which is contained in document 5693/21. For my country and personally for me, it is a great pleasure to see that we are making this first step to get back to business as usual. Guatemala, we commend you for your efforts and we wish you the utmost success. Ambassador, thank you very much. Moving on to item 5. Next, in response to a request from the chair of the Committee on Hemispheric Security, I would like to submit for consideration by the Permanent Council the draft resolution. Date. Chair, apologies. Canada has requested the floor. Apologies. Ambassador Atsit, please, from Canada. Sorry about that.
No worries. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. You're proceeding very efficiently and obviously more efficiently than I am this morning. I did want to say a couple of words on the previous agenda item. I will say a few words first in French and then I'll continue in English. Je voudrais remercier à nouveau le Guatemala pour son offre.
I would like to thank Guatemala for its generous offer to host the meeting. This has been a difficult year for us all. Canada is also pleased at the prospect of meeting in Guatemala. We have been reassured by Guatemala's participation, and with the Secretariat, all the necessary measures will be taken to ensure the security of all the organizations, entities. We are sure that our friends of Guatemala will be able to discharge their responsibilities and make the excellent arrangements as in the past.
Proceed in a straight line. A hill taken in battle today may be swiftly lost tomorrow. Faced with a formidable foe, we must, if circumstances require, be prepared to alter our plans and to take any corrective or alternative measures that may be necessary, and to do so in a timely manner. Given the continuing evolution of the pandemic and the uncertainty that this reality causes, we have taken note of and would be very grateful to both our friends and colleagues in Guatemala and the Secretariat to keep the state of the pandemic under careful review over the coming months and to provide member states with periodic updates concerning preparations as well as the contingency plan should a safe and secure event ultimately not appear possible. So let's not take today's decision as the end of our considerations, but the beginning of a shared commitment to ensure that the upcoming General Assembly will be one in which all can confidently participate in safety and security. And let me very much thank the Ambassador of Guatemala. We're looking forward to the next General Assembly and wish you and your government the best with the preparations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I give the floor to Ambassador Rita Clary de Scioli. Ambassador, go ahead. Thank you, Chair. The Guatemalan delegation thanks the Permanent Council for placing its trust in Guatemala to hold the 51st regular session of the General Assembly in person on November 10th, 11th, and 12th, 2021, through the adoption of the draft resolution presented today by Guatemala, which was done by acclamation. We also thank you for your comments, and we take note of the comments made by the delegation of Canada. We thank you for your good wishes. We also assure all delegations that we will take the recommended measures to avoid the transmission of COVID-19 so that we can hold this hemispheric event successfully. Guatemala will continue to monitor the situation associated to the pandemic so that we can take prompt measures as necessary. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ambassador. We can now move on to item 6 on the order of business. Moving on with the order of business. And in response to a request from the chair of the Committee on Hemispheric Security, I submit for consideration by the Permanent Council the draft resolution date of the third meeting of National Authorities on Transnational Organized Crime convened pursuant to Resolution AG Res 2950, contained in document CP 5695/21. I submit this for your consideration. If there are no requests for the floor, it is so adopted. Moving on to item 6. As the next item on the order of business, I would like to submit for your consideration the following minutes of the Permanent Council meetings. Minutes 2279 of March 12th, 2020, minutes 2280 of the special meeting of April 16th, 2020, record 2282 of the regular meeting of May 13th, 2020, record 2285 of the special meeting of May 27th, 2020, minutes 2286 of the regular meeting of May 27th, 2020, minutes 2289 of the regular meeting of June 19th, 2020, and minutes 2290 of the regular meeting of June 24th, 2020. I submit this for the consideration of the delegations. If there are no further observations or requests for the floor, the aforementioned minutes are considered approved. Now let us move on to item 7, other business. Dear colleagues, this concludes the order of business of this meeting. But before I offer the floor to any delegations that wish to bring to the attention of this council items of an informative nature as other business, first and foremost, I would like to thank the delegations that have submitted timely responses to the questionnaire that was circulated to assess the state of preparedness for a possible return to face-to-face meetings at the headquarters of the organization. 20 delegations have responded, and we are still awaiting the responses of 14 delegations. So I would also request that those that have not had time yet to send their responses to do so at the earliest opportunity. This information, as the questionnaire notes, will be very useful for starting an informed discussion among member states who wish to establish a possible time frame for returning to headquarters, taking into account the current guidelines of the relevant health authorities and the willingness and readiness of delegations to do so. It will also be an important indicator for us to continue calibrating the General Secretariat's administrative policies on this important issue. On a separate matter, I wish to advise you that this afternoon the Secretariat will be distributing the notice of convocation of the meetings of the Style Committee for the 50th regular session of the General Assembly. which will take place the week of May 10th to May 14th. With that, I now offer the delegations the floor at this time, should they wish to speak about any issue. I give the floor to the observer from Spain, Carmen Monton.
Hola, buenos días. Quiero trasladar en este foro de la OEA el éxito compartido de la 20.
There was a meeting that took place in April under the topic Innovation for Sustainable Development, Objective 2020, Ibero-America faced with the coronavirus challenge. At the summit, there were 4 Spanish priorities. First, to guarantee access by the countries of the region to vaccines. In this regard, I want to reiterate the commitment of the President, Pedro Sanchez, where Spain will be donated 7.5 million doses of vaccines against COVID-19 to the countries of the region. This is about 5 to 10% of the total number of those received by our country in 2021. This donation is part of the solidarity vaccination by Spain. The distribution will be done through the COVAX system with support from PAHO. Furthermore, Spain will promote a discussion on elimination of patents from vaccines from amongst our European partners in the framework of the World Trade Organization in order to move forward in the most effective and equitable manner in combating COVID-19. Second, Spain's priority is to create new financial mechanisms allowing the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean to tackle the pandemic and its socioeconomic consequences, giving continuity to the initiative of June 2020, together with a response for Latin America and the Caribbean when confronted with COVID-19. Spain expressly supports the new general appointment of special drawing rights at the International Monetary Fund, which is especially advantageous to those countries suffering from liquidity restrictions given the pandemic. We would like a new instrument to be created, a financial instrument, by availing ourselves of the availability made through this designation for recovery and response to COVID-19, allowing for inclusive and sustainable development. Furthermore, in Spain, recently, a framework collaboration agreement was signed between the European Investment Bank and CAF to finance projects aiming at economic and social recovery post-pandemic. Third and fourthly, the environment and science, technology, and innovation. These are priorities reflected in the Andorra Declaration and special communiques. Lastly, as up to 31 December 2022, we have opened for signature the framework agreement to promote the circulation of talent in the Ibero-American world in order to favor transparency in knowledge, innovation, and scientific and intellectual creation in the Ibero-American area to contribute to the economic recovery of our countries. Spain has also contributed to create the Ibero-American Epidemiological Observatory, the presentation of the second report of Observatory for Climate Change, and approval of 2 Ibero-American programs and initiatives with participation of EFI and Spanish Cooperation Agency to prevent and eradicate gender violence and promote global citizenry for sustainable development. We continue working through multilateralism and solidarity and cooperation with our sister nations. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for that information. I now offer the floor to Ambassador Luan Grisley of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Gracias, señora Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Vincent and the Grenadines takes the floor to inform on the status of the volcanic eruptions in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Between April 9th and 22nd, 32 eruptions were recorded. The alert level remains red. More than 13,000 people remain displaced from the most hazardous areas of the country. One half of the displaced are occupying 88 government-operated shelters, while the other half are with friends and relatives. 1/3 of the country is in a state of desolation and is now at risk from dangerous lahar or mud flows, which are made worse by the heavy rainfall which has begun. The Permanent Mission takes this opportunity on behalf of the government and people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to express gratitude to the Permanent Council for the expressions of solidarity, to thank the Secretary General and the General Secretariat for granting financial assistance through the Inter-American Emergency Aid Fund, FONDEM. The Assistant Secretary General for convening at very short notice a meeting of the Inter-American Committee on Natural Disaster Reduction, and the organs and entities of the committee for their tangible support and the pledges of support. The distinguished member states and permanent observer missions which have provided assistance and have pledged to do so, notably the government of Colombia and other governments.